Welcome, non-autotrophs. This is the return of Sir Chonk after a brief hiatus, and I'm here with a review of Stephen King's You Like It Darker. More a list. I love lists, so I have put the 12 stories in order from crappiest to best, and I shall tell you my opinion, which undoubtedly is wrong. All right. So, what I will say about this particular collection is there wasn't really anything that I hated. It's pretty unusual for me to read a short story collection, not see at least something that I was like, this is pure garbage. There was none of that. So that's a nice perk. There were a few things I didn't like that much, and the one I liked the least, coming at number 12, is Willie the Weirdo. Not a great title, first off. And it's basically about this kid and his family, and the whole family starts laughing like, hey, our brother and or son, he's pretty weird. Like, just like the title. Good job, SK. So anyway, the kid doesn't really connect to too many people, except like his granddad. His granddad's kind of weird also. The kid's is kind of like obsessed with death. So there's that. So he's a little on the weird side. It is pretty short. It's only 12 pages. It didn't do much for me, really. It feels like it's one of those things where like he kind of had an idea and he didn't go too far with it, and then it ended. Great. All right, so that was my deep thoughts on Willie the Weirdo. Coming in at 11th place, I had The Fifth Step, another short one. This is 9 pages. We got a retired guy, a lot of retired guys. What's interesting is as Stephen King gets older, he's writing less writers in Maine and more retired guys hanging out in Florida. Although this particular guy, I don't think he's in Florida. But he is chilling in a park. Well, it's in New York, that's right. He's walking around Central Park in a very retired guy thing to do. And he's just talking about, this random guy stops him, and the guy's like, oh, I gotta tell you this story for my AA thing. And the main dude's like, I don't really want to hear this, but fine. And then we get to hear this guy's story. There's a bit of a twist on the end that's kind of interesting, I suppose. But it wasn't enough to make me too excited about this one. Again, it's all right. For the second crappiest story in the set, it's not bad at all, really. All right. Number 10. This is the first of several longer ones. So he seems to like to write longer short stories, so they're like stories, I guess. And number 10, I have The Answer Man, which I kept reading like, I'm the Answer Man. I kept like thinking that's how he talks every time, like some kind of 20s salesman guy, which maybe that's how he talks. Anyway, we get this guy, Phil, who's in his early 20s, and he's like, his life's just starting out, and he's not sure what to do with himself. He's like, oh, I want to marry this girl, but her family doesn't want me to move back to this town that I like. What am I going to do? Whippity-woppity whoop. So he sees this sign on the highway. It says, Answer Man ahead. Ooh, just like the title. Convenient. And, of course, he goes up to this guy, and the guy's like, I'm the Answer Man. I'll answer stuff. But he's going to pay him to do it. It's like, wait a minute. Is this a scam or not? So the guy's like, pretty sure it might be a scam, but he tries it anyway. And, of course, he asks him all these questions to test him. And, of course, the dude knows everything in like 2 seconds. He's like, I know everything. I'm the Answer Man. And so he gets all good.
Uses that voice?
That's what I told you. My imagination. That's the voice the Answer Man always uses. Hello, I'm answering your men. I don't know. So everything's great. He's like, oh man, everything's coming up Millhouse. Like all the things he's asking for are gonna be great. So he goes and he's having a great old life, and his job is great, and his family's great. He's got a kid. Everything's fantastic. And then he meets the Answer Man the second time, and the Answer Man's answers are like kind of vaguishly darker. And then you're like, oh, something's not going to go so great for this guy. It's pretty obvious what's going to happen. Yeah, so this is, I don't know, it felt like, although I can't specifically recall an example of a story that's exactly like this, it just felt like something I've seen a lot of times, like variations of that. The characters were very much not compelling. Like there was no character depth to any of these people. 50-page story, you had some room for that. And the ending is like really predictable and pretty lazy. But it had some good moments, and I enjoyed doing the Answer Man voice. So there's that. All right. So there's the first 3. And I would say of those 3, I would lean towards saying I disliked those 3. Didn't hate any of them. But the rest of them, I at least thought were decent to good. All right. So the next one I have is called Finn. I guess it ended.
Is it like thinner?
Not thin, Finn with an F.
Oh.
Like, you know, people who work at like the grocery store. And you're like, hey, thanks for doing my groceries, Finn. Because all Finns are like 15 years old. I don't know. Anyway, Finn's like a kid's name, in my opinion. So anyway, this is called Finn. 22 pages. And we're talking about a character whose name is Finn. And he's got awful luck, right? So basically, he talks about how he's had awful luck his whole life. And so that's right. The kid, he's meant to be Irish, right? I forget. So I forget the Stephen King attempt at like doing the Irish dialogue is. I mean, it's a good effort, I guess. It's. Oh yeah, sorry, dialect. Thanks, Hooch. So, it's kind of funny, but then it basically turns into like a crappy version of like The Big Lebowski, where like people think he's like a different guy and like kidnap him and try to torture him to say stuff, but he actually doesn't know any of the stuff. So he's like, I don't know the stuff. They're like, haha, we'll torture you till you tell us. Right? He should have. The answer man would have known. Right? But he's like, I can't tell you because I don't know the answers. You have the wrong guy. Like, yeah, wrong guy. Sure, buddy. So it's kind of like this weird sort of mobstery thing. I thought it was kind of fun in a doopy sort of way. I feel like he definitely could have done more with the ending. The ending just kind of fizzles out and doesn't really get explained. This kind of wraps it up real quick. He's like, and then this happened because I wanted it to. The end. And like, again, it's a short story. It's only 22 pages. I don't really mind abrupt endings in short stories, but this one felt like he definitely like really rushed it and half-assed it. But other than that, I thought it was pretty good. An enjoyable tale all around. So pulling in at number 8 on the countdown is a Red Screen, another short one, 10 pages. And this one, we have a detective, and he's interviewing this guy, and the guy seems to have very obviously have killed his wife, and the guy, like, admits to have killing the person. He's like, so you admit to killing your wife? The guy's like, haha, no, that wasn't actually my wife. Bionk, blonk, blamp. I mean, it's probably the noise that he would have made if he was being dramatic. He's like, it wasn't that, it was in fact my wife was taken over by an alien, and she's part of the preliminary invasion force of aliens. The detective, of course, like, well, you're cuckoo bananas. That's great. Catch you later, bro. But then, after he thinks it's complete garbage for a while, he starts wondering, maybe it wasn't garbage. Maybe there are aliens. Because the guy's like, you know how that aliens can tell if they're taking over your wife if your wife starts nagging you a lot. And so then every man in the world's like, wait a minute, aliens are everywhere. See? Perfect examples. Right. So
part that's called a flump.
In this case, I told you that earlier.
Yeah.
He's like a mushroom guy. So I liked this ending. This one had an ambiguous ending, but I kind of liked it in this case because the story was a lot shorter, and it sort of didn't feel like it needed a fleshed out ending. I kind of liked that it was kind of open a little bit. I like that one. All right. So number 7, rounding out the last of the bottom half, is the first story in the collection, Two Talented Bastids. And he spells it like that, Bastids. This one's 60 pages, so definitely not a short story, but also not a novella either. It's kind of like a blobby thing in the middle. So anyway, we got a narrator here who's talking about his dad, who recently died, and how he and his dad's friend, you know, they had good fortune in their areas of expertise. One is a painter, and I think the other one's a writer, of course. Who else is it going to be? It's Stephen King, painting and writing. So writing. So, and they talk about how, how they have such amazing success in their lifestyle. They sort of get this backstory about all this stuff happening in their life. And the backstory is like, it's all right. But you can kind of see where this is going pretty early. Like, you can probably already guess what's happening in this story just by what I'm telling you. And I'm keeping it really vague on purpose to not ruin it. It's a very easy story to ruin. So they sort of get this whole dad and his friend backstory, and they hang out and, all this stuff in the woods and blah, blah, blah. I don't really want to say anything else, because I think anything else I say is going to ruin it. Anyway, this is okay. I thought it was kind of like spun around a while, didn't get too far. I wasn't super interested, partially because I kind of knew what was happening very early on. But it was like pretty solidly written. I guess I'm kind of surprised I ranked it this high in retrospect. But too late to go back now. All right. Now we're going to move on to the sixth story. I forgot to write how long this one. I think this is the longest one. I believe this is it's Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream. I think this one was 130 pages. So obviously this is a full-out novella. And this is kind of cool. This story I liked the beginning a lot. So this guy Danny, he has a dream, essentially, that he finds he doesn't find. He dreams that he shows up at this like rest stop, and there's this arm sticking out of the ground, and this dog is chewing on the arm. It's like, what the hell's going on, man? And he wakes up. He's like, man, that was a vivid dream. And he starts convincing himself that it wasn't a dream. It was like a vision. So he starts doing some research on rest areas, and then he goes to the rest area. He figures out where it is, and he finds the dead body, and he's like, oh crap, that wasn't a dream. It's like, I better tell the cops about this. The problem with that is, if you call the cops up in the most isolated rest stop that no one ever goes to, and you're like, oh hey, I happen to know where there's a dead body, what do you think the cops are gonna think? Yes, that's what the cop thinks, that he did it, obviously. So this becomes that thing of like the cops thinking he did it, even though he didn't do it, and like the cops start to get him. And a couple of the cop characters are, I don't know, like he's got one detective that he sort of decided partway through the story to really focus on this guy's sort of like, I guess I'm going to call it OCD. That's not what it is. It's some kind of, he mentions what it is in the story, but I forget the name of it. He's like obsessed with numbers, basically. It's kind of, I'd say, OCD adjacent, I guess. And he really focuses on that a lot. And like he kind of almost gets like tied up in that. Like he started telling one story, and it's like, oh, but I like this character. And he kind of got hung up on that for a bit. But anyway, we got kind of an interesting story that goes back and forth with the cops, trying to interest the guy. The only problem here is that he's not great when he tries to write sort of like neurodivergent characters. It feels very cliche. It feels very silly. But that aside, I generally like this story, except it definitely drags on. So I'm not sure why he spends so much time on it, because like it could have been much tighter. It started out kind of fast-paced and sort of like started to drag for a while. But the characters are generally kind of interesting. The story is, I like the concept a lot. I thought that was really good. And overall, I thought the story was good. Just the ending is, kind of underwhelming. Again, it just sort of like, I feel like he's writing the story, and then like his DoorDash arrives. It's like, I gotta end this. Bleep, 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 gotta grab my pizza. And like he ends the story in like 2 seconds, and then grabs a snack, comes back like, whatever, zing, send it off to the editor. They ain't gonna edit it anyway, I'm Stephen King. And they just slap that thing in the book, and there you go. That's kind of what happened at the end of this. But I still did like this. My general thoughts on this story was really good. Just a little long and a little like, problematic in parts. Not too problematic. But overall, good. I enjoyed it. I'd say I really enjoyed at least half of these, which is, a lot for me, because as usual, as you probably know, if this ain't your first time, I hate everything. All right, folks. Number 5 on the list. He goes back to being short stories again. This one is the Turbulence Expert. Turbulent. I typed it wrong on my notes. So, I'm like Ron Burgundy. The Turbulence Expert. I don't think I just read what I see. So anyway, the Turbulence Expert is about a man who gets a mysterious call from another man who's also a mysterious man. We don't know if he's an expert on turbulence specifically. They keep it a little vague. But he does have a mysterious job. So one mysterious man gets a call from a second mysterious man who has to do a mysterious job on a mysterious plane. Yes. And he's just him hanging out on the plane, and he's like terrified of flying, but clearly his like whole job involves flying. It's like, this guy has a stressful job.
Why would he take that job?
Because he's got super magical skills that only he can utilize that are not even remotely explained.
Or because groceries are
So basically he has this talent to help like the planes not crash and whatever, but they don't really explain it. They don't even really show it. It's sort of like, again, I liked it, but like, it's very hollow. So I was interested the whole time. I mean, it's only 14 pages. Read it really fast. It was enjoyable, but I also feel like there was a lot of opportunities to give us some more detailed explanation in there. But anyway, still, Very good. Enjoyable. I was a fan of this one. All right. Coming into the top 4. In the top 4, we're all very good. Like, really good. I would say that these are all 4 stories. I would say, hey, if you don't like that many short stories, these 4 are at least searching out and reading them because they're all very good. All right. The first one was On Slide In Road. Haha, slide in. It's not a porn joke. Get your head out of the gutter. So we got a family plus grandpa on the road trip to visit grandpa's dying sister. So the family dynamics are like really cliche. They're like all, but like cliche in a way that like makes it kind of fun, right? So like the grandpa's all cranky and he hates everything, and the dad's just like, everybody needs to shut the hell up, right? And the mom's like, let's just smile and have a good time, right? Kids are all the kids are all looking at their phones. They don't give a crap what's going on. So very like cliche, but very like fun cliche. So they're doing their thing and they're all cranky. And the grandpa's like, let's take this shortcut. And the dad's like, Jesus, this is not going to be good. But he doesn't want to hear any complaining. It's like, yep, fine, take the shortcut. I don't even complain. So they take the shortcut, and predictably, the shortcut does not go well. So the road gets narrower and narrower, and eventually, like, as the guy's trying to like turn around and stuff, he like drives off the road, and he's like, "Oh, the road fell away." The grandpa's, "No, you drive like crap." So they're arguing about nonsense. Meanwhile, the kid gets out and just starts wandering around, and as predicted in this story collection, he finds a dead body, of course. So the kid's like, "Oh, there's a dead body in this sewer pipe," and he like strolls away.
Is it Georgie?
Well, he did have a paper boat and one missing arm. So anyway. As he's walking away from the pipe, 2 guys come strolling up, like, "Hey, did you see anything in that drain pipe?" The kid's like, "No." But I mean, they're pretty obvious. They know what's going on. And it's pretty obvious these 2 dudes are the killers. So then the family has to be like, oh no, how are we going to get away from these killers? And how they manage to do it is pretty fun. I thought this was pretty entertaining. I enjoyed this one. Good ending. There's not too many good endings generally. And this is a good one. Again, it's short, it's 20 pages, but this one's like had the right amount of detail, depth, pacing. This had a sort of like a nice balance of everything. Good story. Really enjoyed it. All right. Number 3, top 3, skibbity boop, is Laurie. This is about another guy whose wife died. A lot of families with dead people in them. And the sisters are all worried about him being like depressed and miserable, like blowing his brains out with a shotgun. Like, you're going to kill yourself with a cheeseburger. Anyway, so she buys him a dog, so he'll have companionship. He's like, I don't want a dog. The last thing I want is a dog. And of course, we've all seen this story before. What happens?
He gets a dog and he loves the
dog. The dude loves the dog. He's like, I can't go anywhere without my dog, right? So the dog's kind of cute, and he's fat, and he waddles around and stuff, and they hang out, and like, not a lot happens. It's mostly just this guy like being kind of sad, and then like being like, this dog's pretty awesome, and then alligator fight.
With the dog?
You heard it here first. Not first. Yep, an alligator shows up and they fight it. So this kind of comes out of nowhere. It's like a pretty casual story about this guy just trying to like deal with this stuff, and this dog being cute and kind of cool, and then alligator fight. So I'm going to give you a spoiler right now because I would want this spoiler. The dog is fine. The dog does not die. The dog does not get hurt. It's a good story, despite the complete randomness of an alligator fight in the middle of it. Still enjoyable. Plus, I'm a sucker for a story with a cool dog. All right. So, did I record? Right? Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
all right.
Recording.
So yeah, and here's the very alligator right here on the cover.
Oh, I thought it was an island.
Well, it looks like an island, but when closer inspection, John, you can see it's a big old alligator, and there's this alligator butt with some lightning. So anyway, yeah. Alligator. So that's where the alligator cover comes in for those of you scoring at home. Also, here's Darth Frogulaire in a random stack of video games. That's not relevant. So anyway, 2 stories left. And this next one, my second favorite one, is Rattlesnakes, which I think is the most, I'll say, popular one on the list, I suspect. It's getting the most hype. It's going to be the most well-known. It's another novella-sized story, and I gotta say that I think at this point, Stephen King's niche seems to be novella, right? Novels lately, not the best for him, in my opinion, with some exceptions. Short stories, okay. You know, I like some certainly.
He's a good short story
But
writer.
he
Very
used
few
to
people are.
he used to be a great short story writer. Now he still has some good ones. Like I said, most of these are good.
Yeah.
But I feel like his best area are his novellas.
He's one
So
of those
like,
few people who's good at that.
yeah, like
art.
Just After Sunset had like 3 novellas in it, and they were all awesome. The Mist, of course, is great. The Long Walk is great. It's got a ton of really great novellas. The one earlier that whose name I just totally forgot that I talked about was good. And this Rattlesnakes is also very good. Now this one has a retired guy hanging out in Florida. Stephen King's new main writer is the retired guy in Florida. And this is a sequel to Cujo. So if you have not read Cujo, I'm not going to spoil this story, but by talking about this story, I will spoil the hell
Skip to the next story
out of
if you haven't
Cujo.
read Cujo.
So if you haven't read Cujo, you're going to want to skip this review, and you're also going to want to skip reading this story until after you read Cujo. Although, you know, Cujo came out, what, 45 years ago? So you've had some time to get to it, right? So anyway, he goes to this place in Florida. He's obviously kind of miserable because things haven't gone so well for him. And what with his spoilers from Cujo coming, his son dying from a massive dog essentially murdering him, and then eventually his wife dying as well after they sort of had like a back and forth relationship for a while. So he's here, he moves to this place, he's pretty miserable. You know, wife recently died, kid's dead, he thinks of his kid everywhere he goes, right? This place has got snakes. All used to have like snakes everywhere.
Are they out of plane?
No, they're in a cul-de-sac or something.
Well, he's sick of these
Mother effing snakes in this mother effing cul-de-sac. So, and actually the title is clever. He's sort of like, there's actually a couple. This story's got like 3 or 4 like really outstanding lines in it. Like, it's not too often that I go, whoa, and you got to pause and like reread because like it's a really excellent line. I didn't highlight those lines in my head specifically, but I remember seeing some. And one of them has to do with like a vague revelation of the title, which is very clever. So I'm going to say about that. But so basically we have this dude and he's like, you know, miserable as hell. And he's got a neighbor, and his neighbor is Wackadoo McGee. So her 2 twin children were murdered by rattlesnakes like, I think like 40 years ago, but she pushes a stroller around with like their clothes in it and acts like they're still there. Now remember, our hero has a dead kid himself, so he's like, you know, he's having some, you know, PTSD seeing this crazy lady wheel around her 2 fake
Maybe
children.
She has PTSD.
No, she definitely does.
Which is why
He
she's-
also does. So, like, they're both having some serious issues going on. And there's also elements of a ghost story. It's like, ooh, what's going on here? That's pretty cool. But then the woman dies,
Spoiler.
right? Well, this is pretty early in the story. It's like within the first third of the story. And he finds the body, and then he calls the cops. And she apparently had left. She's wealthy, and he has a decent amount of money too, but not as much as she. So even though she's only known him like for a couple of days, she changed her will and put him in his will without him knowing it. So of course the police are like, you found the body and your name's in the will. So we have this thing again where the police are like, we think you did it, even though you didn't. Which, again, I think Stephen King's actually really good at these sort of like police procedural sort of things. But we just had this story already earlier in this collection. You know what I mean? So I didn't really like seeing sort of like the same story angle twice in like 12 stories. That ain't that great. That being aside, this is like a super good sort of like slow burn ghost story, grief tale about this dude just dealing with a lot of awful crap. And that's really good. That's sort of like the best parts of the story. And then the ghost story part gets a little more Stephen King-y, I'll say. A little more ghosty aggressive. And he's got kind of a weird ending that is not... It's not a terrible ending. It's just, I feel like... I don't know. It's vague enough. It is. So he doesn't mean to make it vague. Like, he means... I believe Stephen King intends the ghost to be real. But I think if you try hard enough, you can kind of force yourself as a reader to infer that the ghosts aren't real, and it's just like his grief manifesting itself in a really weird fashion. And that's what I'm going to go with, even though I don't believe that's what Stephen King intended. And that makes the story significantly better in my part. I still really like this. Excellent story overall. But yeah, good novella. All right, so down to the last one, my number one, my favorite story in this collection. And obviously, if you read this and you know the table of contents, you know what it is. But it's The Dreamers. It's 35 pages long. I'm not sure this will be other people's favorite story, but I really enjoyed it. This guy comes back from Vietnam, and he doesn't know what to do with himself that much because he's back from Vietnam, you know. But his sister had taught him how to transcribe like really effectively before, like when he was younger. So that's good. That's like a job for him. But of course, his sister is also dead because we have to have dead. Everyone has to have a dead family member. What is this, the Olympics? But anyway, he also has probably an eidetic memory. They don't exactly say that he does for sure, but they suspect he might. So he gets a job. It's a boring job doing like transcribing stuff. And then he's bored. So he sees this ad for some scientist guy being like, hey man, I'm trying to do some weird stuff. I need a guy who's great at transcribing stuff because we're not going to film or record anything. It's not going to be on paper. He's like, all right, let's see what this is about. So he goes and things get wacky, right? So this is pretty cool. This is like got a sprinkling of Lovecraft. There's definitely some cool, the horror elements are really good. Psychological screwiness. It's not that long, 35 pages, but like it reads pretty quick. Very interesting. Even though I guess it's not really surprising, it's like still very engaging. And it's got a cool ending. And the premise of why things get sort of like hookity spookity is really interesting. And I don't recall seeing a story with this particular specific premise before, which is unusual because it's pretty hard to have a story be like, I've never seen that. You know what I mean? It probably has appeared in something else. I just can't remember what it is, having seen one. So I really like that. To me, this particular story felt like an old school throwback Stephen King short story. Like if I read this in Night Shift or Skeleton Crew, it would not have felt out of place. And what's interesting about that is I think this is the one in his, or is it The Answer Man? I think I was wrong. I think it's The Answer Man, where he wrote like the first half of the story and then like tossed it in the closet for like 30 years and then wrote the rest of it after that. But that's not this story, so never mind.
DoorDash came.
Yeah, maybe. So anyway, this is great. I really liked it. This, to me, felt like a true old school Stephen King at his best kind of story, and you just do not see that very often anymore. That's why that one is my favorite. Really enjoyed it. All right, so this story here, this book, you like it, Daka? Maybe he's talking about turkey, right? Like some dark meat versus the white, you know. About 500 pages in total, 12 stories. Good mixture of stuff, a few redundancies, but not too bad. Overall, I really enjoyed it. If I was going to give it a ranking, I'd say maybe like 7 out of 10, which sounds bad maybe from some people, but for me, 7 out of 10 is quite good. So that's what I got to say about this. Feel free in the comments to tell me how my favorite story is the worst and how my least favorite story is the best and how I'm probably stupid and can't read. All right, so there you go. That's what I have to say about that. Any comments, Coleridge Hooch?
Maybe I'll read it someday.
Maybe she'll read it someday. That's compelling. That's all I have to say about this. Boop.